This episode of our This Week in XR podcast is sponsored by Zapper. Zapper is one of the world's leading XR companies. Over the past 12 years, they've won numerous awards for memorable campaigns. They've democratized AR by making tools and SDKs that anyone can use. And they created ZapBox, the world's most affordable mixed reality headset. Most recently, Zapper worked with Unilever to create an enhanced QR code called Accessible QR, which enables packaged goods to speak to the blind and partially sighted. If you're thinking XR, give the team at Zapper a call or visit zapper.com to see how they can help you on your XR journey. Good morning, everybody. I'm Charlie Fink with Ted Schilowitz and Roni Abovitz. It is Friday, December 15th, 2023, and it's This Week in XR. Our guest is Marcus Segal. He is the founder and CEO of ForeVR, which has a number of very simple, familiar games like ForeVR Bowling and ForeVR Darts. I think we're going to get a pretty good developers' perspective on what's going on with the Quest and with Meta right now, and what it's like inside of the VR market where it really counts. So, again, thank you to our sponsor, Zapper, and let's get to the news. First of all, Roni was at Art Basel this week. We were just chatting up about that in the green room. Roni, is there anything from either an AI or an XR perspective about Art Basel that we should know?
Um, there might have been at events that were going on. The part I got exposed to was actually quite analog. It was interesting. It was an artist that's very digital and very digital forward who then went out of his way to make gigantic prints using one of the oldest silk screen printers in Paris. I think that goes back hundreds of years. So
Oh man.
it was the reverse of digital and AI. He took he took work he watercolored, digitized it, built a following on Instagram, and then made massive prints at this very old printer on like really fancy paper with from 1500s
Wow.
techniques, and that people loved. So I thought it was very interesting, this reversing digitization into something very analog and old, and the value of those prints seemed to be much more interesting to people because of the realness of the paper and the nature of how he used these like old print shops and stuff. So I think it was a very interesting thing as a 180-degree opposite from like an NFT in the digital world. The tangibility and the feeling of it seemed to also imbibe it with value. So it was a very
Kind of like,
interesting
kind of like
perspective.
what's happening with the revolution of vinyl becoming,
Mm-hmm.
a thing again, and the
Yeah.
liner notes and the album covers and the actual vinyl pressings becoming important again.
Yeah.
All things sort of cycle through their life, right? We move
I
into
will be
digital and then
doing
we
a
move back to
vinyl. I
analog.
will let you guys know, but I'm working on a vinyl too.
All
Of
right.
course you are.
Of course you are. Right. So
Vinyl's
here's
awesome.
Here's a fun one, guys, just to start off the day. Dictionary.com announced that the AI sense of the word hallucinate is the 2023 word of the year. Objections were immediately lodged by the neglected AI senses of the words prompt, model, and animate.
Huh. I don't even know where to go with that one.
Nope, that was just the clever opening of my column. I couldn't
There you go.
resist. So Epic Games wins a $92 million judgment against Google for violating antitrust laws in the App Store by prohibiting them from charging customers directly. Uh, this is a very big deal because it's a kind of reversal of the earlier verdict in the bench trial. So I don't know where they go from here.
Yeah, I mean,
Supreme Court.
they've been clawing around on this for years now, right? Trying to pull back their ownership stake, and it looks like maybe the tide is moving in that direction a little bit now, huh?
So does this verdict apply to Apple also, or are they reopening that lawsuit? Also, Google said they would appeal. So for those developers trapped in the app stores right now, I'm not sure your release is imminent. But it does seem like this is going to become a bigger and bigger deal as Apple is drawn into it.
I guess we'll have to see. I think this is one of those never-ending sagas, right? Where they're just going to keep working this and working this because the economics are so meaningful on both sides of the equation that they'd rather fight than settle. So
Yeah, I was thinking that Google, when they found out it was a $92 million judgment, was like, phew, we thought it was going to be
piece
painful.
of cake, right? Yeah, just write a check and move on. Of
I mean,
Exactly.
just to put in context for our listeners and viewers, that is not the highest salary of top Google execs.
course, yeah.
So you're talking about less than a 1 year salary. Maybe you're a top in the top 10 of executives. That may be a bonus. So in the scheme of things for them, it's a pimple on a pimple on the elephant.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a $92 billion thing. So on one way, is it a Pyrrhic victory?
Yeah.
Because whoever gave that judgment knows it's meaningless. It's like asking us for like a dollar.
Well,
You
it was a
lost.
jury award, so it's possible they didn't really understand the nuances that you are now explaining.
Unaware of the valuation of Google.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're just normal people walking around trying to get by. So,
Yes.
speaking of not normal things, Mistral, the French, I guess OpenAI, just raised 415 million at a $2 billion valuation, led by many of the usual suspects like SoftBank. Their technology makes it easy for people to build their own models. I guess that's their unique kind of spin. The Chat GPT store, although you can build your own models, you can't self-distribute them. On some kind of an exchange. Uh, Mistral says that people are going to build the apps that they build, and they're not responsible for that. Uh,
Mhm.
Much like social media companies, try and protect themselves by saying that they can't control their users either. So interesting company. I don't know. Do you guys have any perspective on them? Not as well known as OpenAI.
The only perspective is more of a global perspective, and I'm a lot of the talks and discussions I'm doing these days relate to inspiration versus IP gathering or IP theft, and that's another one of those really challenging areas, because everyone's inspired by everything that we touch, right? We don't live in a vacuum, we don't work in a vacuum, we don't create in a vacuum. If you're a creator, so you're inspired by things. Back when we were kids, we'd go to the library, we'd read books. Our teachers and professors would say, go look at this if you're interested in pursuing this field. If you're
Hmm.
interested in, you know, doing something in this vein, go see what others have done. And now we have an electronic version of that crosses, again, these chasms of ownership so easily. So it's interesting to kind of watch, the people that are trying to hold their own, some certain artists and authors, and creators, and others that just say, I'm using it as inspiration. So
Hmm.
um, the closed models are also an interesting subset of that.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because
Yeah.
the EU has finalized their AI Act. And they tried to balance a lot of interests, but I think it's going to have a profound effect on the industry. The oversight is kind of obvious, right? They, um, want to make sure the training data is transparent, that they comply with copyright laws, and if demanded by regulators, to provide technical documentation so that they can look at the systems. Uh, it also addresses things like the police using AI for facial recognition. So I think they confined that to things like terrorism. Um, it's unclear. It doesn't exactly apply to open source models, which is what you just mentioned, Ted, and that could be problematic in the future. But it's something, and it's going to apply to American companies doing business in the EU. And of course, American companies immediately responded by saying what they're asking is actually impossible.
hmm Well, this is a question maybe for Roni. This is what I think potentially a good and valid use of the underpinnings of blockchain is if the impossibility of human tracking and even the computers themselves tracking the ownership stake and ownership kind of provenance of a certain piece of IP or collective of IP or collective of areas of inspiration. Roni, do you think blockchain can be used if an AI chooses to be fully on the blockchain, that every instance of everything it references and pulls can make a call and a queue to someone, and if they register their IP in that chain and say, it's this novel that I wrote, or this article that I wrote, or this music that I created, or whatever it is, I want to make sure that anytime anybody touches it in an AI instance, it triggers a royalty moment, like they do with the streaming audio services all around the world today, right? They're all these little micropayments that get triggered. but it's still somewhat of a manual process. I'm just curious if you guys have a thought
So,
on
so Ted, I'm going to pull a Ted Apple Vision Pro moment on you,
that.
because I'm building stuff in AI right now. All I'll do is smile and wink.
Okay, well, that's enough for me to know that isn't a terrible idea, and someone will, maybe it's you or maybe it's others or a collective of people, will figure out a way to start compensating people for their work in a way that is just as modern as the AI technology that is
Well,
sort of cutting through
listen,
it right now.
listen to this news story again, totally related to what you're talking about. OpenAI has entered into a deal with Alex Springer. For those of you who don't know Alex Springer, they're the biggest publisher, news publisher. They're the Rupert Murdoch of Germany, if you will. They also own Politico and Business Insider in the United States, which are very prestigious publications that are known for their original reporting and their deep research. So they're going to feed all of that into their GPT model, and it'll be totally, in terms of current events and news, it'll totally be licensed material.
And there'll be some sort of pay gate. They'll
Yeah,
see a return on that investment based on that use case. So there you go. It's starting to come together. Yeah.
yeah. And so there's
Yeah,
another company. Sorry, go ahead, Ronnie.
I was gonna say I know the CEO Matthias Doppler. They were actually Magic Leap investors too. So one of the things about them is they're very forward. They want to be very early into tech. It is a little, I'll tell you that a little weird um, from the perspective of, are they handing over the keys to the kingdom, um, or do they realize the keys will be taken anyway, so they're trying to benefit from it?
I would think the latter. I would also think OpenAI, needs air cover.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
maybe whatever they're paying Apple's Axel Springer, if it covers them for the whole news industry, it probably is well worth it.
And others will follow, right? I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
it's a step in the
I
direction
mean,
that.
Twitter has Grok, right, which is kind of reading all of Twitter and reconstituting it for you in some weird way, right? So, I mean, it's you're beginning to
I've been
see
using
that.
it. I've been using it. It's a weak ass Chat GPT, basically, that is
Ooh, I like that.
better for current events. Not completely accurate. You kind of have to click the links that it gives you. So it's kind of a Google search. Um, so that's where it is right now. I mean, supposedly I assume it'll keep getting better, but right now I paid for it and I'm not sure I'm going to keep paying for it because I have Chat GPT and other platforms. So I was going to mention Essential AI. They raised $56.5 million. That used to be a lot. They had raised 8 million previously, but again, it's AMD, Google, Nvidia, and some other guys. So those are some pretty knowledgeable. They do a full stack to increase productivity and animate uh, uh, business workflows. So and here's one we should hit. I don't. Marcus isn't in the green room yet. Tesla robot came out this week, and it can handle an egg without breaking it.
At the same time, they're recalling 2 million Teslas because
I
they're
know.
overly concerned about the autonomous driving having too many incidents, as it were.
By the
Imagine
way,
having an accident with your robot.
Mm. Well, it does happen, and robots can be very scary when they go wrong. So,
Charlie, can I tell you the egg robot thing? It just reminded me of the very first year we had to make a robot at a conference. It was at the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons conference, and we were across the way from another company. It was a German company that had a big giant robot, and it was this idea of which robot can touch an egg carefully. And one was like peeling the shell off, and everyone was trying to show the egg somehow as the arbiter of somehow meaningfulness. And what we did is we had our robot touch the opposing CEO, our competitor at the time. We had our robot like kind of brush his nose. I'm like, the egg it could crush, but like having it do this very gently and us guaranteeing it's not going to hurt you is a different game. Will you let your robot do that? He was like, hell no.
hmm
So that other robot out of business. But the whole egg thing is like, I think people have been trying to use that for a long time. It doesn't tell you
It's a
though.
kind of Turing test for robots.
Yeah, it is like the egg test. It's kind of funny, the robot egg test.
All right, Marcus is in the green room, so let's bring him in and find out what's going on in the world of meta developers.
Right.
We should have that kind of waiting music that they used to use in
Mhm.
TV game shows.
There it is.
Marcus,
Hey guys,
hey, welcome.
glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Don't think you know Roni and Ted.
Not yet.
We know your
This is
work
the
well, though.
beginning of our journey together, gentlemen.
We're a fan of what you do, and Roni and Charlie have heard me reference this both in person and on the podcast many times. Anybody that tracks in the well understood trail of the power of the Nintendo Wii and creates a really, really good and accurate simulation of something we used to do in the real world, and then we did in the Wii, and now we do in VR, ticks all the boxes for me. And your bowling simulator, the ForeVR bowling thing, is one of those because it's a lot of fun. I played it myself, just in training, planing, and I played it with other people, both randomly and friends. And it is, to me, it's the evolution of how much fun we used to have in the living room with Wii bowling, and it's even better. So good
I'll
on
tell
you.
you this: you do not want to play Charlie in bowling.
That was dumb luck on the lowest level. That's all I can say.
Does Charlie know how to spin the ball in VR and turn it over and hit strike after strike?
I mean, it was really embarrassing.
I did practice a little bit before Marcus and I met up and stuff, but I will say this about ForeVR bowling: give yourself some room, or you're going to break your hand and your
Absolutely.
controller.
Just like the Wii. Like if you remember what happened with the
Exactly.
Wii years ago.
Except you didn't have a freaking headset on the Wii.
Right.
But I like the fact that they added, when Marcus developed it, they added some levels of magic in it, because I mean it's sort of Walkabout Mini Golf does this too. It's delightful because why does it have to have gravity? Right? We're in VR, it could do anything. That's why when people say they want to walk in VR, I'm like, why would you care about walking in VR?
Yeah, why would you want to do such a pedestrian activity as walking?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
and you can change the lighting into the neon mode, and you can do all that stuff in an instant. It's very fun.
So, and we're fans. Congratulations! It's a great game. And so,
Thank
how is it going? It's Christmas, right? All developers in the Meta Store are happy in December.
I mean, it really is. It really is a Q4 plus January business in VR. I think I think that we're all sort of in hurry up and wait mode to see how many people got a Quest 3 for Christmas. Um, when on the when I saw, I got to see the device a long time ago, and I was like, wow, this is a big leap forward over the Quest 2. Unfortunately, it was accompanied by a big price increase. And so,
Yeah.
I don't really know. My mom and dad never would have gotten me anything that was, the inflation adjusted price of $700.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it's going to do, but I think the devices do keep getting better, and we'll see with Apple entering the fray what'll happen.
Are you starting to look at developing, because with certainly the unknowns around the Quest 3's market success, but are you looking at developing mixed reality sort of use cases for the different sports that you do, the sort of bar sports and things?
Yeah, we if you download Forever Bowl and Forever Pool now, there are MR modes. So if you guys
They already have it. Right.
Yeah, if you update the games you have, people really love playing pool in MR.
Yeah, because it's in their living room, right, in their house.
It's in their living room, and it's cool that you could have a pool table in your living room, even if your living room is small, and playing against somebody, and it just is really it's a really nice MR application. So that one's out, bowl is out, and pool and soon bowl in a week are both on PSVR 2.
Oh,
So,
nice.
yeah,
That's gonna be huge for you, I think.
Well, I don't think that PSVR 2 is huge.
Oh no!
But
I'm sorry. Is it not available on the 4?
It's not it's only available in VR. None of our games are available
Okay.
in any format other than VR, but they're on Steam, they're on PSVR 2, and we're excited to see kind of the games be everywhere that you can play. But it's really one of those the winter. I think we're in the long winter for VR before the devices get cheaper again. At $300, it was a no-brainer to take a flyer on a VR device. At $600 plus, we'll
Well, if
see.
you want a Quest 2, which is really not worse than the Quest 3, except for the mixed reality, of which there is not a lot yet.
Yeah.
So for me, if I were going to buy, if price was holding me back, I could go onto eBay and for $100 buy, a new
Quest 2.
headset or a new used headset in its box.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and stick it right under the tree for $100, and then you have plenty of money left over for software, and it's still less than $200. So, I think if price was keeping people back, and by the way, I think this is really turning out to be true. A rare prediction of mine that they're flying off the shelves. I mean, there's a lot
The
of
old ones.
reports. Yeah, the two.
I heard, Charlie, it's outselling the 3 by like 5 to 1, 10 to 1 or something.
Well,
Like, which
they
is
cut the price to $250, and a lot of retailers are, marking it down even more. I think I saw Walmart at $229. So I mean, again, if price was
That's-
holding you back,
Yeah, that's a lot of device for $229.
It really is.
Right.
It's kind of remarkable what the market will do when you've got a newer product, but
Yeah.
still inventory of an older product.
and I'm still using it. I've got to tell you, because I find that the 3 gets warm and it dries out my eyes. I don't mind the amount of warmth. I mean, it's only like an hour and a half of battery, but still my eyes dry out. And so that makes you get a feeling when your eyes get dry like that. I got to rub my eyes. I got to close my eyes. So you got to take the headset off. So in many ways, the 2 is still the better device. Although, as I said, for mixed reality, obviously, it's not so good.
but for
Go ahead.
Oh,
I
are
felt
you
like
going to be
oh,
are you
sorry.
going to be on the 2? Are you going to be still thinking 2 for next year?
Well, for me, basically, we're set up for Quest 2 and Quest 3, and basically we're going to keep making the games backwards compatible for as long as we can, so that people who bought the game can keep playing, and we aren't interested in locking anybody out. And so, I think with VR, there's a common behavior, which is people kind of get the device and they buy 3 or 4 games and they kind of binge them, and then they put the device in a drawer and they forget that they have it. And so, I think that we're the form factor, I think the boot up process, a lot of things have to change before VR can become a daily habit. Like I've got a Quest. I'm one of those suckers who bought the Quest Pro for $1,000, and
Yeah, I
I
did that too. That was a mistake. Ted did
I
too.
know.
But
And
Ted charged it to Paramount,
yeah,
so
well,
that's the
yeah. I
difference.
mean, I have to get everything for work, so.
well, I basically, I put this thing on, and I am in VR almost every day, and it's decided it needs to update my controllers, and my friends are waiting for
Oh,
me.
that used to be a Steam thing. Oh God.
And it's like I just blew through 12% of my battery getting these controllers, and it's like you're sitting there and it's going,
And also the charging,
2%,
the
3%.
desktop charging is a disaster. I've been through 3 of those
Oh.
plates. They break easily. And as you said, there are charging issues. I love the open sides. I really do. It's always, especially as someone who wears glasses, I need extra air in there.
Those aftermarket fans are great. They're like $30.
Oh, really? I have to look at that.
Yeah, I mean, it's
'cause it
another
would
thing you got to charge, but
because of that, sort of heat management problem, I really can't do the fitness games or something like Beat Saber. After 15 minutes, I'm completely fogged. I can't. I produce too much moisture.
I'm a supernatural fan. Yeah, I like to think my body is operating quite efficiently as I'm drenched in sweat. I have the fan attachment you can buy on Amazon for $30, and it blows air in there, and I can keep playing.
That's a great invention. I have to look that up.
But
Hey,
yeah, I got
Marcus,
this. Yeah.
can we go back a step, because now we're in the mix of talking like people that are into VR every second of their day. Can you back up and tell us a little bit about your career arc and what led you to this, what you've done before VR, if that was interesting and relevant, and
Sure.
what got you to the stage you're at now?
Sure. So basically, when I got out of college, I was making TV shows for History Channel and A&E, and I was a computer nerd. And then when the internet 1.0 kind of took off, I moved, sold my stuff, moved to Silicon Valley and took a job at emusic.com and began a startup journey. And I became a startup's operations guy, and I was a COO of emusic.com. And then I did some, kind of more infrastructure plays. And then I was very early at Zynga, like the first 24 people. And initially, they had me kind of operating everything that wasn't games. And so I was sort of setting up all of the support functions like payments and QA and things like that. But then at the time, we had, Mafia Wars and poker. And then we had this long tail of reskins of Mafia Wars. Like, there was Pirate Wars, Fashion Wars, Prison Wars, Space Wars, like this long list of spreadsheet games. And no one was managing
Well,
them.
so this was before Farmville?
Oh, yeah. And so basically no one was managing the long tail of games, and they were still making money. And it's like, hey, back then, Blockbuster's still renting Flashdance. Like if the tape's making money on the shelf, like don't turn it off. And so I raised my hand and said, hey, I don't want to just run cost centers. Let me take these games. And so I got a handful of games and I started operating them. And it turned out I had a great passion for it and I really loved it. And so I moved over to the game side of the house. I became the COO of the game studios. And I always, operated, I kind of became the guy who ran the games that were on their way out. I was the long tail guy. And I had the experience of building a game hands-on from scratch. And I certainly had never worked on any game that was high fidelity. And so after I left Zynga, I, am figuring out what to do next. And there I am in the lockdowns, right? I'm locked down in a cabin in Northern California, and I'm like, okay, it's time. Like it's VR's time. And what I want to do right now is I want to play Wii sports with my friends who are all over the place. That's what I want to exist. And so I decided to create Forever Games to basically bring these games to market to sort of solve this problem.
And did you raise capital to do this? Was it a totally self-funded thing, or?
Yeah, I raised capital. I raised venture capital and some seed capital from friends who also wanted to get together and play.
Right.
And so, I some great investors like Justin Kahn and Emmett Shear from Twitch were in there. Mark Pincus from Zynga, like just a bunch of great people who were like, yes, this makes
nice
sense.
Network to have.
Yeah, it's a great network to have. But it was basically like, yes, this makes sense.
It was just a natural evolution play, basically, for you. You sort of moved from place to place. I'm curious if you know our friend Maureen, who's now at Baobab. She was a Zynga.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Maureen's a good friend and an incredible talent. I think she's a generational talent, actually. She knew when she was at Zynga. We used to talk about it.
But by the way, just to digress for 1 second, when you meet her, have you met her, Ted?
Oh yeah, many times. We're
she is a very, very powerful person.
Yes,
she's a little bit like Roni.
She's a force of nature.
When she walks into the room, you're like, oh whoa.
Yeah, she's got a lot going on. Yes,
she definitely has the force on her side.
Yeah,
and even when we were at Zynga, she stood out for her, basically her analytical prowess, which is we were a data-driven shop.
Of course.
But she was the rare blend of incredible data chops, plus she's an artist. And we didn't have a lot of that. And we were not the friendliest place for such a person, because basically we would emulate, that's the word, for other games that were in the market, and we put out our version. So, at Zynga, when we made Farmville, there was a games in China that were doing well. And then a game called Farmtown came out in the U.S. and it got to 5 million DAU, and then we had to put together a team and respond. And we released Farmville in 12 weeks, and Farmtown was releasing new content once every 2 weeks, and we decided to release new content 5 times a week in 26 languages. And so
you caught the Facebook wave just perfectly. Like you were sort of there at their inflection point where they went from college students to the entire world.
I'm going to just say I don't know if this is controversial to say this, but I think that Zynga was actually a part of that happening because people started joining Facebook to play the games. Yeah. Facebook used to send us emails because they would forward emails because customer service, people thought that Facebook made the games.
Mm.
But Marcus, I remember that, and I remember asking people, "Oh, why isn't Facebook buying Zynga?" So I met
Yeah.
Mark Pincus, and I was like, it seemed that it was fated to happen, and when it didn't make any sense because I
Mhm.
think a third of Facebook users were coming in because of Zynga at the time. So it was like one of those curious head scratching what happened here.
Yeah, I mean, it's I could only tell one side of the story. I couldn't tell
Yeah.
their side of the story, but I do think it was an interesting experience. I'll say this for Facebook. So, for all of us who've been in the game for a long time, like usually if you're a big customer, you buy a lot of a company's products or spend a lot of money on them, they might take you to a basketball game once in a while or
Right.
send you a fruit basket at the holidays. Like there's a lot of like,
Oh
especially
yeah.
especially back then, there was a lot of
Oh
like
yeah.
biz niceness, right?
Yep. Yep.
Not with Facebook. We were their biggest advertiser by a mile. By a mile. Never got a fruit basket, never got a card, never was taken to a basketball game or a
That's why
baseball
people are fired and hired by email. Same
exactly.
thing, right? I mean, it's like you're a number.
Yeah, and I think that for him, for Zuck, my theory is that he basically looked at his feed and it's like, this is too much of this company and too
Yes.
much games in general. Now, in my mind, it's like, how hard would it be to create a tab for people that like games and all the game stuff would go over there? And that didn't seem like it would be too hard, but you know, they really kind of pushed games to the side for a while there,
Yeah.
including Zynga, and it hit
So
us.
so the world
Just
turns in VR, of course, for them. It's all about games.
yeah, exactly. And then they had to watch Twitch
And they're
happen.
not getting it right. They're not really getting it right, not themselves.
No, it's tough. Look, I mean,
Social VR is so hard.
I think VR's. I think that's true. I think for me, it starts when I put on the headset. What's wrong? I put on the headset and I am sort of looking at a store like I would be looking on my phone. Like
Mhm.
it's not the metaverse. I'm not like walking in to this environment and it's like here's my stuff. I'm in
Well, that's
a
what that was their original plan, but I think they pivoted away from that, and they're putting the home screen into the real world for the Quest 3. And I think that's a good idea because
yeah.
games have not worked out for them the way they thought, and there is a tremendous amount of churn, and so they need to pivot. Mixed reality seems to be the pivot, and I think they're smart. They need to, I mean, they are in it up to their neck, so they're not turning back. And so they have to find something that works. And it may be mixed reality, but more than mixed reality. And here's where I think we differ a little bit, Marcus, is that I don't think what we're missing at this point is better technology. The technology is really good. And, we've been saying for years, oh, standalone with reasonable graphics. I mean, we got it. That's
Hmm.
what it is. And it still hasn't hit an inflection point or a hockey stick point where it's more than a niche games console. And I think Apple will be up against the same thing when they launch. Okay, here's the technology. Where is Game of Thrones? If you remember back in the 2000s when The Sopranos came out, I think we're talking around 2000. Yeah, I think it was year 2000. The Sopranos came out. It was like, oh my God, do I have HBO? I have to get HBO. Whatever
Okay,
it costs, I need to get HBO. And I kept it for 5 years.
but Charlie, I'm just gonna just say the word Halo, which is a
Yes,
amazing
yes.
game in VR, and it's not in the top 50. It's not in the top 50.
Because we don't know what that game or experience
No,
is yet.
No,
Charlie,
but
can I argue with you
Please.
guys for a sec?
Yes.
Because that's what we do here.
Yes.
And Marcus, tell me what you think. But I think the friction between putting on something like a Quest 3 or the Apple Vision Pro and putting on a pair of Oakleys is the friction between snorkeling and scuba diving and putting on a pair of sunglasses. And I'm just follow this for a second. You're saying the technology isn't a problem. I'm saying it still is. When you could pick up a Quest 10 and it's like putting on a pair of Oakleys and just works and all the bullshit we talked about is gone, you're gonna have a billion plus people. Because I think that stuff that's in the way also stopped people from like adopting cell phones and other things at scale. Apple created a frictionless system. It took them to like the iPhone 4, 5, 6 to really nail it, but you had to use a phone functionally, right? So if you want people to do games, which like you don't have to, you have to have that frictionless of sitting down, picking up your PlayStation or Xbox, picking up your phone and just like opening up an app. I think that level of no mental energy friction, by the way, will come. Who's going to get it first? Will it be Apple? Will it be someone else? But that like lightness of something, you just take it off your desk and put it on your face and you're going. I think what you're doing, Marcus, would explode.
But I think I expressed this earlier. It's like I put the device on. I got friends waiting to play, and I burned 10% of my battery, and it feels like forever. Waiting in VR feels really like
a minute is 10 minutes.
And I'm sitting there and I'm going like this, my hands waiting to see if I could do anything.
But Marcus, imagine this: you go like this, and there are your friends. And then
Roni is putting on his glasses for those listening.
But Roni,
you have to hang on until that moment, because then your company explodes. You have got to survive till then.
1,000%. But that could be it's going to be really hard. But I do think that the other challenge though is you're going to put on that Apple Vision Pro, and then you're going to pick up your Xbox controller, and now you're playing an Xbox game on an IMAX screen, sitting on your couch. And I don't know that VR is going to have an because they didn't even mention the letters V and R anywhere in that Apple demo. I watched it 3 times. The letters V and R, even words with V in it, were not, I think, deliberately not used. So it couldn't be recut to say the letters V and R. And I think it's going to be, now you have, the compute power in a Quest 3 of a PlayStation 2 or 3, and the graphics rendering and the frame rate challenges that we face as developers in this space up against a gaming supercomputer casting on my face. And so I'm not sure if the Apple headset's going to be a leap forward for virtual reality at all. And on top of that, you're going to be able to wear the thing and receive your calls. And I'm playing. An important text message came in. I'm going to hold on, pause, and and all that. And the controllerless aspect of the Apple, that means, think about how many buttons are on a Quest 2 or 3 controller. It's still fewer buttons than you have on a Sony or an Xbox. That limits gameplay.
Well, and I think what's interesting listening to you guys talk for the last few minutes around this is there's a thesis that kind of keeps bubbling up in the background for me, moves to the foreground, then moves to the background. And this is not maybe the most optimistic news I think any of us want to hear, but I am building more and more of a version of where the future goes, that anytime you're using any sort of wearable, it is not ever going to reach mainstream threshold. It is an exotic device by nature. It has a value point, it has a market point, it has a user base, a passionate user base that we're all in. But I think until you get to a different sort of what the evolution of technology will bring us in terms of like simulation rooms in our homes and things that just happen in the same way that we turn on a TV or open our computer, the simple act of doffing and donning the device and all of the things that come with it, which of course get solved, right? I mean, all the little things, but just the act of that makes it exotic in and of itself. It's the same reason that there are not theme parks on every corner of the planet, right? They are specialized devices in and of themselves that drive massive amounts of people and massive economics, but different than everyone having a TV in their living room, right? So I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, but that's sort of where I'm going with all this.
I'm just flashing back to the Meta, the Workrooms product, and we really try to use it at ForeVR.
Yeah, we did too.
Yeah,
we're distributed team.
Me too.
And it was really funny because you could tell when someone was looking at their phone while they'd have their headset and you see their avatar's head is just kind of like this.
I actually think the ideal way to do it, I taught all the way through the pandemic, and because of the topics that I teach, all the students and I had VR headsets. So we would put our headsets on, have a VR experience, even if it's a social experience, and then we take our headsets off and come back to Zoom and are able to have a discussion. And because we were going in for limited times, because this was a moment in history where we all wanted to be together, even though we had to be apart, it made the classes really special, right? And since we have been in person, I have not been able to replicate that. That being said, it is rare to have that much of a student's attention in the physical world. They've come from something, they're going to something, they're involved with other people in whatever drama, be it sports or dating or whatever. So it changes the context completely. And that, of course, makes them less receptive to deep information about any one topic. But I think, there is a way to be remote, which doesn't have the downsides of Zoom or VR, but it is so specialized, and I can't make people do it. I can't replicate it just with one class. I
But
need to have a
yeah,
whole semester to get people acclimated. But that combination of 2D and 3D seems to be a sweet spot. And I think maybe that's kind of where Apple is thinking they're going to position the Vision Pro.
where I think Ted is, the word you said something. You said the two words. Maybe they're one word with a hyphen. It depends on your way you do things. But mass market.
Hmm.
And
Mm.
so the idea of mass market, the threshold for mass market, you and I maybe have different ideas about what that is. So, a PlayStation 5 is a mass market device. Do we agree?
Oh, yes,
Okay. And we agree that the iPhone is a mass market device.
massively mass.
Okay. There's a so
Big
PlayStation
number
5,
difference, right?
PlayStation 5, 100 million. They'll sell 100 to 120 million of those in a 5 or 6 year cycle. And there's a billion smartphones.
Right.
So I
There's
just say
actually 3 billion smartphones, but
three
yeah.
billion smartphones. So
Yeah.
like
So
a billion and a half of them.
a healthy market for VR could be 10, 15 million devices working.
At the same
I
time.
still kind of consider that pseudo exotic though. Like it's
Okay.
Yes,
more on the
exactly,
exotic side.
exactly.
So I'd say is a PlayStation 5. I think that VR across multiple devices can get to the 100 million threshold in the next 5 years.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree with that. Yeah.
but I do not think it will have, unfortunately, the PlayStation 5. I read somewhere that they have an 85% activation rate, meaning 85% of the people that own a PlayStation 5 turn it on every month. And I think that I don't know what it is. Meta will never say, but I don't know that it's above 20 or 25% active. So if they've sold 20 million of them,
Right.
they got 4 million active user base. Hard to build a business if you're a developer. Made also more difficult when they give away free games that come with the headset. You're like, oh no, don't give away free games. you know.
Yeah.
So I think that I think it will get to that 100 million unit number within 5 years. But I also thought that 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So when I started my company.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, these are interesting things that we think about and look at, all the time. Here's another vein of questioning I'm curious about, Marcus, in terms of like if listeners on this are looking to emulate you and your success in this world, maybe tell them about how big your team is, the level of success you feel like you've achieved. You're probably doing relatively okay economically, and you're supporting yourself and your family and your team, right? But how big
Yeah.
is that as a group?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you the journey. So basically, at the end of 2021, we were really crushing it. I mean, that was the
The
Quest
height
2.
of the pandemic.
Quest
Yeah.
two.
That was yeah, and we had ramped up to a team of about 42,
Wow.
and now we are a tiny but mighty team of like 20, and we are kind of right sized for the opportunity now. It is a blast to make games in VR, and the people that you get to work with are really passionate about it and they're believers. But it is a tough business right now, and it is near impossible right now to raise money for a VR startup.
Mhm.
And so, if you're going to
Yeah.
raise money for VR to do something, I would just give you
AI VR.
yeah, yeah, and I think something in the ed tech space, business applications are having an easier time getting funding. Like there's a company called Transfer that's doing really well. And so that's kind of the landscape right now. Is for games, it's tough.
Well, it's interesting because you led me sort of into the next question. As you look at the evolution, Charlie and I talk very often about industrial applications being so successful. And with the level of simulation of those 20 developers and whoever markets and all that group that you've done on the commercial side, do you think about, I wouldn't call it a pivot, but a extension of what you do to have fun in VR, to bring that skill base into be productive in
this
VR?
Is what HoloGate did, right? During the pandemic, when their public space VR was essentially frozen, they started to take in defense work, and that's turned out to be more lucrative, and obviously it can scale in a way that location-based entertainment can't. So the continuing their location-based business, now that it's sort of coming back to life because they had a economically very attractive product, but the defense thing is exploding, and it's raised their valuation, and it enabled them to raise around where no one in VR, as you said, Marcus, can get anyone's attention.
So they almost use the VR as the consumer fun VR as an R&D platform in their real profit zone, which is an interesting.
Marcus, I'm going to give you like unsolicited Lucy 5 cents on this. To raise anything right now from venture capital, unless you're going for some kind of like at scale AI. But here's where I think as a gaming company you can be funded. If you are multi-device and you have a really good team on VR, but you're on phones and tablets and other stuff, then you're risk balanced. And then however long it takes to get to 100 million, investors are cool. You're building your brand, you're building an audience, and you'll just like transfer them from like phone, PlayStation to VR. They would much rather fund that. I've done probably a dozen projects like that where private equity and venture have called me up, and we've like looked at companies, and that's basically the most sane way to do it, because none of them can predict exactly. But by the way, many funds believe everything you believe, that it will go to 100 million, it'll go to $1 billion. They don't know exactly when. So this kind of like portfolio approach as a studio, that you're agnostic to the shift from phone to tablet to XR to AR to whether it's Apple or Meta or this kind of mixed reality or that kind of VR. Like if you are a bit neutral and you can just move your brand across those devices, I bet your funding ability goes up 100x versus I'm all in on just VR right now, which means I have some sense of the timing, and they all go, nobody really knows the exact sense. So I think risk balance might help you a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, look, the challenge there is so basically when you're building ForeVR, I don't mean my company's name. I mean when you're building games in VR for the purpose of VR, in order to be great in VR, right? In order to be the standout game in VR requires a different kind of investment. So if you look at what other bowling games look like that are multi-device, they're not as rich in experience and everything. But I agree with you. Being if you're going to go start a game company, do not be VR only. It's not time.
So speaking of time, this is about all the time we have in our podcast. This is Marcus, you are now the 51st guest this year who has made us feel like we never have enough time for the interview. So I apologize for that. This has been a fantastic conversation. You have such a keen and inside view of what's happening in VR. Of course, we're all hoping that the Quest 3 gets out there in tens of millions in the coming year, fingers crossed, and that the category continues to grow. And as Roni said, that you can find other markets for your terrific product. Because I think the idea of taking a game like bowling or darts or pool that everybody can play and everyone is familiar with, and doing it in VR and in impossible and magical ways is still and always will be a fantastic idea. So I'm looking forward to the next steps for you and your company.
Yeah.
So that's all the show we have. Sorry.
Please keep at it, because more than anything, what you do is really fun, and it's fun for people to play it, and that's what works about this stuff. So
we shouldn't forget that we are fundamentally in the fun business, and even the podcast is part of that fun business.
Marcus, you're right. Just hang on.
We'll do it. All right, thanks, guys.
All right, everybody. Have a great weekend, and thanks for listening.
Bye.